I'm Thomas, a 2-year-old photographer from Chicago, though I haven't set foot in my hometown for 16 years. My family always had a twisted sense of humor, but what they thought would be their funniest prank changed everything. Abandoning me in Colorado's wilderness was supposed to build character. Instead, it built a completely new life. 101 unanswered calls later, I stopped trying to reach them. The family that left me stranded never imagined I'd never come back. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to rebuild your life after someone you trusted let you down. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I never felt like I truly belonged in my own family. My father, Richard, was a demanding corporate executive who ran our household like one of his companies, complete with performance reviews and consequences for falling short. My mother, Sandra, mastered the art of looking the other way, her passive enablement just as harmful as my father's active cruelty. Then there were my two older brothers, Jason and Michael, who seemed to compete for who could torment me most creatively. The only somewhat ally I had was my younger sister, Amanda, who occasionally stood up for me when things got particularly bad, though her attempts were usually silenced quickly. Our family culture revolved around this twisted concept of toughening up through humiliation. It's just a joke became the shield they wielded to deflect any criticism of their behavior. These weren't harmless pranks or gentle teasing. These were calculated acts designed to break me down. I still remember my 16th birthday. After begging for weeks, my parents finally agreed to let me invite friends over for a small party. I spent days cleaning the house and planning activities, desperate to make a good impression on the few friends I had managed to make despite my family's reputation for strangeness. The cake arrived, candles were lit, and just as my friends gathered around to sing, Jason and Michael emerged from behind the door with super soakers filled with vinegar. They completely soaked me, my friends, and the cake while my parents laughed. "Just toughening you up, Tommy boy," my father roared as my friends awkwardly called their parents for early pickup. I spent the rest of my birthday alone in my room, the smell of vinegar lingering in my clothes and hair. My high school graduation was another opportunity they couldn't pass up. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I heard an unusual amount of laughter from the audience. It wasn't until I got back to my seat and a classmate showed me a photo that I realized what happened. My brothers had taped a crude drawing to my back before I left home, visible to everyone as I walked across stage. The principal had noticed, but decided not to embarrass me further by stopping the ceremony. My moment of achievement became another joke at my expense. Even college move-in day wasn't sacred. I had worked 2 jobs the summer before freshman year to buy everything I needed for my dorm. When we arrived and started unloading, I discovered they had replaced most of my carefully packed belongings with garbage, old newspapers, and broken items from our basement. "Consider it a lesson in adaptability," my father said, dropping me off with basically nothing. Real men can make do with less. I spent my first week of college dumpster diving behind the student union and borrowing essentials from my bewildered roommate. Despite all this, I kept trying to earn their approval. I maintained a 3.9 GPA in high school, joined the debate team, and even won a state photography contest my senior year. None of it mattered. Academic achievements were dismissed as showing off, and my passion for photography was constantly mocked as not a real job. "When are you going to grow up and do something serious?" my father would ask whenever he saw me with my camera. "Your brothers never wasted time on hobbies." This was ironic since Jason was still bouncing between dead-end jobs despite his business degree, and Michael had dropped out of college to find himself through a series of increasingly questionable, get-rich-quick schemes. But in my family's eyes, I was the disappointment. After graduating college with a degree in visual arts that I paid for myself through scholarships and part-time jobs, I stubbornly pursued my photography, despite their derision. I managed to get my work displayed in a few local exhibits, landed my first paid assignments shooting products for small businesses, and slowly built a following on social media. Each small success felt like a personal victory, though I knew better than to share them with my family. When the invitation came for the annual family vacation, I initially refused. These trips had historically been torture chambers disguised as bonding experiences. There was the time they accidentally left me at a gas station for 3 hours in Wisconsin, or the fishing trip where they threw all my clothes in the lake to teach me to pack lighter. Each memory was worse than the last. "It'll be different this time," my mother promised over the phone. "Your father is trying to be better. We all miss you." "Jason and Michael have matured," my father added, having apparently been listening on another extension. "We want to support your photography thing. The mountains will be a perfect backdrop, right?" Against my better judgment, a small part of me still craved their approval. Maybe they had changed. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe, finally, they would see me as worthy of respect. So, I agreed to join them for a week-long trip to Rocky Mountain National Park, hoping this might be the beginning of a healthier relationship with my family. It would turn out to be the last time I ever saw most of them, though not for the reasons you might expect. The first 2 days of our Rocky Mountain vacation were surprisingly pleasant. We stayed in a rustic cabin near the park entrance, and for once, the usual tension seemed absent. My father asked about my photography projects with what appeared to be genuine interest. My brothers refrained from their usual cutting remarks. Even my mother seemed more present, less anxious than usual. Amanda and I went on a short hike together, and she commented on how nice it was to see everyone getting along. "I think they finally see how talented you are," she said, as we watched the sunset from a scenic overlook. "Dad was showing your website to his golf buddies last week." I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. Several times I caught whispered conversations that abruptly stopped when I entered a room. Strange smiles were exchanged over dinner. Once, I overheard Michael say he has no idea before Jason shushed him. I dismissed these warning signs, telling myself I was being paranoid, that my history with them was making me see problems where there were none. On the third day, my father suggested we all go on a more challenging hike to Angel's Landing, a remote area known for spectacular views. During breakfast, they surprised me by suggesting we split up for part of the day. "You should take your time with your photography," my father said, spreading jam on his toast with unusual care. "We know you can't get good shots with us rushing you along. We'll meet back at the parking lot by 5, my mother added. "That gives you the whole day to get those perfect mountain pictures." It seemed too good to be true. For once, they were accommodating my passion instead of mocking it. I packed my best lenses, extra batteries, a light tripod, and enough water and snacks for the day. Michael even helped carry my gear to the car, another unprecedented show of support. The hike was strenuous, but rewarding. Without my family rushing me, I lost myself in the creative process, setting up careful compositions of jagged peaks, capturing the play of light through ancient pines, and documenting tiny alpine flowers clinging to precarious cliff edges. For the first time in years, I felt at peace with my family waiting for me, presumably proud of my dedication to my craft. I lost track of time, realizing with a start that it was already 4:45 p.m. I quickly packed up my equipment and hurried down the trail, not wanting to keep them waiting after they'd been so considerate. I arrived at the parking lot at 5:10 p.m., slightly out of breath and apologetic for my tardiness. What I saw stopped me cold. My family stood beside our rental SUV, but something was wrong. The back hatch was open, and I could see all my luggage piled on the ground. My backpack, laptop bag, and even my secondary camera gear had been removed from the vehicle. "What's going on?" I asked, approaching cautiously. My father's face held that familiar smirk I'd grown to dread throughout my childhood. "We've decided you need one final character-building challenge, Thomas. Consider it a graduation into real manhood," Jason added, leaning against the car with his arms crossed. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes, staring at her shoes as Michael explained the challenge. "You're always going on about being independent and how your photography will make you successful," he said. "So prove it. Find your own way back to Chicago." I thought it was another of their sick jokes, until my father threw my wallet on top of my luggage. "We left you your ID and credit cards. Though I doubt you have enough credit limit to fly home." "You can't be serious," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We're in Colorado. That's over 1,000 miles from home. That's what makes it interesting." Jason laughed. "Let's see if he can make it back before classes start next month." I pulled out my phone to call for help, seeing with horror that the battery was at only 10%. They'd ensured I'd have no way to immediately contact anyone by keeping me out all day taking photos, burning through my battery. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice rising with panic. "You can't just leave me here." "We're not leaving you nowhere," my father said dismissively. "There's a ranger station 5 miles back. Or you could try hitchhiking. Consider it a life experience." Amanda was crying silently in the back seat as my mother finally spoke. "You'll thank us later, Thomas. Sometimes people need a push to realize their potential." Before I could respond, they were all back in the car. My father started the engine as I lunged for the door handles, finding them already locked. "See you when you make it home, photographer boy." Michael called out the window as they pulled away. I stood there in disbelief, watching the dust from their car as they disappeared down the mountain road, leaving me alone with my luggage and equipment as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon. The reality of my situation hit me like a physical blow. I was alone in a national park, over 1,000 miles from home, with limited funds, a dying phone, and night approaching in mountain terrain known for dangerous wildlife and freezing temperatures. I immediately tried calling them, but every call went straight to voicemail. I sent text after text, alternating between pleading and threatening, but none were delivered. By the 10th attempt, I realized they had blocked my number or turned off their phones. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment prank. They had planned this all along, deliberately ensuring I would be stranded with no immediate way to get help. My phone battery died after I had left my 101st missed call. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped rapidly, and I heard rustling in the nearby underbrush. I used my camera equipment bag as a makeshift shelter, huddling under a tree at the edge of the now empty parking lot, clutching my pocket knife and wondering how my own family could do this to me. That night, as I shivered in the mountain darkness, I made a promise to myself. If I survived this, I would never give them the power to hurt me again. That first night alone in the mountains was the longest of my life. The temperature dropped to near freezing, and I had only my light jacket for warmth. I emptied my camera equipment bag and crawled inside it for insulation, clutching my gear close to my chest, not for protection, but because it represented my only valuable possessions and potential livelihood. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by strange noises that sent my heart racing. Twice I heard heavy footsteps and snuffling that I was certain belonged to a bear. Once, the unmistakable howl of coyotes echoed through the darkness, sounding much too close for comfort. I gripped my pocket knife tightly, knowing it would provide little protection against wild animals but finding some comfort in not being completely defenseless. By dawn, I was exhausted, hungry, and colder than I'd ever been. My phone battery had completely died during the night after reaching 101 missed calls and numerous unanswered texts. The final message I sent before it died was simply, "How could you do this to me?" I had no way of knowing if they had even read it. As the first light broke over the mountains, I assessed my situation. I had approximately $43 in cash, 2 credit cards that were nearly maxed out from purchasing camera equipment, a half-empty water bottle, 1 granola bar, and my photography gear. The rental car lot where we'd parked was at a trailhead several miles from the main park facilities, and I had no idea when another visitor might arrive. Around 9 in the morning, a park service truck pulled into the lot. A ranger stepped out, clearly surprised to find someone there so early, especially surrounded by luggage. "You camping here?" he asked, his expression changing to concern as he took in my disheveled appearance and the luggage scattered around me. "My family left me," I explained, my voice hoarse from the cold night air. "They drove off yesterday and blocked my calls." The ranger, whose name badge read David, looked skeptical at first, but as I showed him my dead phone and explained the situation in more detail, his face darkened with anger. "That's messed up," he said finally. "But unfortunately, there's not much officially I can do. You're an adult, and technically, they didn't commit a crime by leaving you here." My heart sank, but David wasn't finished. "Officially, all I can do is direct you to the main visitor center. Unofficially, He reached into his truck and pulled out a paper bag. "Here's my lunch. You look like you need it more than I do." The sandwich and apple he gave me were the best meal I'd ever tasted. David also provided a spare jacket from his truck and offered to charge my phone while he finished his morning rounds. "The closest town is Pine Ridge, about 15 miles down the mountain," he explained. "I'd drive you, but I'm not allowed to transport civilians without authorization." He did give me detailed directions, a park map, and a warning about wildlife. "Start walking now. Stick to the main road, and you should reach town before dark. And whatever you do, don't try to cut through the backcountry. People die out there every year." After thanking David and retrieving my still-dead phone, his truck charger hadn't worked with my phone model, I repacked my essential belongings in my camera backpack, reluctantly left behind my larger suitcase with David's promise to keep it safe for a few days, and began the long walk down the mountain. The journey was brutal. The high altitude made breathing difficult, and the heavy pack dug into my shoulders. After 4 hours of walking, I'd covered less than 5 miles and was seriously questioning whether I'd make it to town before nightfall. My expensive leather shoes, perfect for city photography assignments, but terrible for hiking, had already raised blisters on both heels. Around 2 in the afternoon, a miracle happened. A couple in a rented Jeep pulled alongside me, the woman rolling down her window with a concerned expression. "Are you okay?" she asked, taking in my limping gait and sweat-soaked clothes. I gave them an abbreviated version of my situation, and without hesitation, they offered me a ride to Pine Ridge. John and Karen were celebrating their 10th anniversary with a cross-country road trip and couldn't fathom how a family could abandon one of their own. "If our son was stranded anywhere, we'd move heaven and earth to get to him," Karen said during the drive, handing me a bottle of water from their cooler. They dropped me at a small motel in Pine Ridge, a tourist town that catered to park visitors, and even offered to pay for a night's stay. I refused, not wanting to take advantage of their kindness, but accepted $20 when John insisted, bringing my total cash reserves to just over $60. Reality set in quickly after they drove away. The cheapest motel room was $89 per night, well beyond my means. I found a public park with benches, and spent that first night there, using my backpack as a pillow and the jacket David had given me as a blanket. The following week established my new routine. I woke each morning on a different park bench, trying to avoid being noticed by local police. I washed in public restrooms, brushing my teeth with a finger since I had no toothbrush. I rationed my money carefully, buying the cheapest possible food to stretch my funds. A loaf of bread and peanut butter lasted several days. Each afternoon, I walked to the local library, where I could charge my phone and use the computers to search for jobs and housing. I checked my messages obsessively, but there was nothing from my family. No worried texts, no missed calls, no emails asking if I was safe. The silence was perhaps the cruelest part of their joke. I wasn't even worth checking on. On my 6th day in Pine Ridge, desperate and down to my last $12, I stopped at a cafe called the Mountain Brew to ask if they were hiring. The owner, a woman in her 50s named Elaine, looked me up and down skeptically. "You're not from around here," she said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am," I replied, trying to appear more put together than I felt. "I'm new in town and looking for work." "Where are you staying?" she asked. I hesitated, not wanting to admit I was homeless, but something in her eyes told me honesty might be my best approach. "Currently between places," I said carefully. "I had a family situation." Elaine's expression softened slightly. "Dishes need washing. Pays minimum wage, plus 1 meal per shift. Start now." That night, after scrubbing hundreds of dishes and coffee mugs, I enjoyed my first hot meal in nearly a week. As I was finishing, Elaine approached with a cup of coffee and sat across from me. "My son walked out 5 years ago," she said without preamble, "called his father and me every name in the book, and said he never wanted to see us again. Still hurts every day." I didn't know how to respond, but she continued before I could. "There's a storage room upstairs, with a cot we use during blizzards. It's not much, but it's better than wherever you've been sleeping. You can stay until you find something else. I started to thank her, but she waved it away. Sometimes family isn't who you're born to. It's who sees you drowning and throws a rope. That night, lying on a narrow cot, surrounded by coffee supplies and bakery ingredients, I slept without fear for the first time since being abandoned. I was still angry, still hurt, still 1,000 miles from everything I'd known, but I wasn't alone anymore. Someone had thrown me a rope. 3 weeks into my new life in Pine Ridge, I moved from the storage room above the Mountain Brew to a shared apartment with Miguel, one of the kitchen workers. He needed a roommate after his previous one left unexpectedly, and I needed a real place to sleep. The apartment was small, barely big enough for 2 twin beds and a battered couch, but it felt like a mansion compared to the storage room or park benches. Just temporary, man, Miguel assured me as he helped clear space for my few belongings. We both find better places soon. Miguel had come to Colorado from Arizona 2 years earlier, also running from family problems. He never shared the details, and I didn't ask, but there was an understanding between us, a recognition of similar wounds that created an immediate bond. At the cafe, I graduated from dishwasher to barista after Elaine discovered I could create simple latte art. The tips were better, and customers responded well to my quiet politeness. Several regulars began requesting me specifically, and Elaine increased my hours. "You're good with people," she told me. "They trust you." That's rare. Each week, I put aside as much money as possible. Miguel taught me to be frugal, showing me which grocery stores had the best deals and how to make simple meals last for days. We split everything down the middle, carefully counting out coins for shared expenses. The library became my second home. Each afternoon before my shift, I would spend hours using their computers to rebuild my online portfolio. I had my camera and the photos I'd taken before being abandoned, including the spectacular mountain shots from that final day. I created a new email address and social media accounts, deliberately choosing not to contact anyone from my old life. It wasn't that I couldn't reach out. By this point, I had a working phone again, a cheap prepaid model that served the basic functions. I chose not to call because the silence from my family told me everything I needed to know. In their minds, I was either teaching me a lesson or I wasn't worth worrying about. Either way, I decided they didn't deserve to know if I was safe. My break came unexpectedly during my second month in Pine Ridge. A local real estate agent noticed my camera as I was photographing the sunset from the town square. She approached and asked if I did professional work. By the end of the conversation, I had my first Colorado client shooting properties for her online listings. The real estate photography led to other local jobs, photographing events for the town newspaper, taking portraits for families, and documenting a small wedding at the park. I invested every spare dollar back into equipment, slowly rebuilding what I had left behind. One Tuesday afternoon, a well-dressed man in his 60s came into the cafe and ordered a complicated espresso drink. As I prepared it, he studied the framed photographs on the wall, all taken by me and displayed with Elaine's encouragement. "These yours?" he asked, gesturing toward a particularly striking image of the mountains at dawn. "Yes, sir," I replied, carefully creating a Rosetta pattern in the foam. "You have a good eye," he said, accepting the drink. "I'm James Foster. I own a gallery in Denver." My hand trembled slightly as I wiped down the counter. "Thomas, pleased to meet you." He handed me a business card. "I'm putting together an exhibition on new Colorado artists. Send me your portfolio. Might be a fit." That night, I stayed late at the library, carefully selecting my best work and writing a professional email to James. The subject line read simply, "The barista," with the mountain photos. While my professional life was taking shape, my personal connections grew stronger. Miguel and I moved from being convenient roommates to genuine friends. We watched old movies on his laptop, hiked local trails on our days off, and talked late into the night about our lives before Pine Ridge. He never pushed for details about my family, and I returned the favor, both of us recognizing the pain behind our silences. Through Miguel, I met Rachel, a third-grade teacher who came to the cafe each morning for a vanilla latte. She was intrigued by my story, or at least the partial version I shared, and invited me to join a group of friends for their weekly trivia night at the local brewery. "You look like someone who knows random facts," she teased. The trivia group became the center of my social world. Artists, teachers, a park ranger, a veterinarian, and various other young professionals who had chosen the small-town mountain life over more lucrative opportunities elsewhere. They welcomed me without reservation, impressed by my photography and amused by my competitive trivia skills. Rachel and I began spending time alone, first under the pretense of her showing me local photography spots, then simply because we enjoyed each other's company. Our first kiss happened during a thunderstorm when we took shelter in a gazebo at the town park. Lightning illuminated the mountains as our lips met, and for the first time since being abandoned, I felt a sense of belonging. The healing wasn't just external. 6 weeks after arriving in Pine Ridge, I started weekly counseling sessions with Dr. Wilson, an older psychologist who operated on a sliding scale for those with limited income. Our first session was the first time I told the complete story of my abandonment and the years of abuse disguised as jokes that preceded it. "What your family did wasn't just cruel," Dr. Wilson said after listening intently. "It was abusive. They've been abusing you for years, Thomas, but they never hit me," I argued weakly. "Abuse isn't just physical," he explained. "Emotional and psychological abuse can cause deeper, longer-lasting damage. The pranks you described are textbook examples of systematic degradation designed to destroy your self-worth." Over the following months, Dr. Wilson helped me understand the cycles of family abuse, how I had been programmed to seek approval that would never come, and how my photography had been both my escape and the thing that threatened my family's control over me. "Success and independence are threats to abusers," he explained. "Your growing photography career represented your potential escape from their influence. Abandoning you was both punishment and an attempt to break you completely." The most difficult session came when Dr. Wilson asked about my long-term plans. "Are you working toward going home eventually?" I sat silently for a long time before answering. "I don't think I have a home to go back to, and I'm not sure I want one anymore." "Home doesn't have to be a place you return to," he said gently. "It can be a place you create." By the 6-month mark, I had made a decision. The 101 missed calls from that first desperate night would remain unanswered. I wouldn't be reaching out to my family, not to tell them I was safe, not to confront them, not even to formally cut ties. Their silence had spoken volumes, and I would respond in kind. Instead of trying to repair what was broken, I would build something new. "You're not running away," Dr. Wilson assured me when I shared my decision. "You're choosing to move forward." And forward I went, step by careful step, building a life I never could have imagined during those first terrifying nights alone in the mountains. 3 years after being abandoned in the mountains, my life had transformed beyond recognition. The exhibition with James Foster's gallery had been a breakthrough success, with the Denver Post describing my wilderness photography as hauntingly beautiful, capturing the terrifying vastness and serene majesty of nature with equal authenticity. My signature style, which critics called beautiful abandonment, featured isolated objects or landscapes that conveyed both loneliness and strength. The Denver show led to features in several regional magazines, then a commission from National Geographic for a series on changing mountain ecosystems. I no longer needed to work at the Mountain Brew, though I still stopped by daily to see Elaine and bring her fresh pastries from the bakery down the street. With my growing income, I opened a small studio in Pine Ridge, converting an old storage space above the hardware store into a combination gallery and workspace. I began teaching photography workshops on weekends, guiding tourists and aspiring photographers to capture the landscapes that had become my sanctuary. "You have a gift for helping people see beauty in unexpected places," a student told me after a particularly successful workshop, "especially the broken or forgotten things." My personal life had blossomed alongside my career. Rachel and I moved in together after a year of dating, buying a small cabin on the outskirts of town that needed extensive renovation. We spent weekends tearing out old carpeting refinishing hardwood floors, and arguing good-naturedly about paint colors. "This place is like us," she said one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset after a day of renovations. "A little broken, but worth the effort." Miguel remained my closest friend, now managing the Mountain Brew and taking business classes at the community college. When Rachel and I set our wedding date, there was never any question about who would be my best man. "You sure you don't want to invite your family?" he asked one night, as we sampled potential wedding cakes that his new girlfriend had baked. "Not saying you should, just asking." "You guys are my family," I replied, and I meant it. The people I'd met in Pine Ridge had shown me what family should be. Supportive, honest, accepting of flaws without using them as weapons. I had just finished mounting new work for a solo exhibition at my studio when the email appeared in my inbox. The subject line read simply, "Thomas, it's Amanda." My hands shook so badly, I had to set down my phone. I hadn't heard from my sister in 3 years. I'd often wondered about her, the only family member who had shown me kindness, however limited. I wondered if she had been in on the prank or if she had tried to find me afterward. I waited until Rachel came home to open the message, needing her steadying presence beside me. "Thomas," the email began. "I've written this message 100 times in my head. I don't expect forgiveness or even a response. I just need you to know what happened." Amanda explained that she had been told they were just going to leave me at the trailhead for an hour to teach me a lesson about punctuality. She had protested, but was overruled. When they returned to the cabin and hours passed with no contact from me, she began to worry. "Mom kept saying you were fine, that you'd call when you got tired of being stubborn. Dad said you needed to learn self-reliance, but by midnight, even they were checking their phones." According to Amanda, the family narrative quickly shifted. When I didn't call for help, their concern transformed into anger. They convinced themselves you were punishing them, that you were deliberately staying away to worry everyone. After 3 days, they finally called the park rangers, who confirmed I had been there but had left. No one knew where I had gone, and my social media accounts had gone dark. "They told everyone you had a breakdown and ran away," Amanda wrote. "Mom cried at church about her troubled son who abandoned the family during vacation. Dad told his friends you were always unstable. But I knew the truth." The most shocking revelation came at the end of the email. Amanda had left home the following year, unable to bear the toxic environment any longer. She had been searching for me ever since, finally finding my new photography website through a magazine article. "They follow your career now," she wrote. "Dad has Google alerts set up for your name. They've seen your success, and they've rewritten history. Now they claim they always supported your photography, that the mountain trip was your idea, that you left because you were selfish." The final paragraph hit me like a physical blow. "I thought you should know they're planning to attend your gallery opening next month in Denver. I saw the invitation on Dad's desk. They're telling everyone it's a family reunion. I'm so sorry, Thomas, for everything." I stared at the screen long after finishing the email, emotions crashing through me like storm waves. Anger, betrayal, vindication, fear, and a strange, hollow grief for the family I never really had. "What do you want to do?" Rachel asked, her hand steady on my shoulder. "I don't know," I admitted. I never thought I'd have to face them again. The nightmares returned that night, dreams of being alone in the darkness, calling for help that never came. I woke gasping, sweat-soaked, and disoriented, reaching instinctively for Rachel beside me. Over the next weeks, I discussed the situation with Dr. Wilson, who had remained my therapist through regular video sessions even after he moved to a different state. "This is ultimately about your healing, Thomas," he said. "You don't owe them a reunion or an explanation. But I wonder if confronting them might help you find closure." Rachel and Miguel were more protective. "They abandoned you in the wilderness," Rachel reminded me. "They don't get to crash back into your life when it's convenient." Miguel was even more direct. "I'll stand at the door and personally block them if you want." I appreciated their concern, but as the exhibition date approached, I made my decision. I wouldn't try to prevent my family from attending, but I wouldn't welcome them either. This was my space, my success, my new life. If they wanted to witness it, they would do so on my terms. I did reach out to Amanda, suggesting we meet at a coffee shop in Denver the week before the opening. When she walked in, I barely recognized the confident young woman who had replaced the timid girl I remembered. We hugged awkwardly, then sat in silence for several moments, the weight of 3 years stretching between us. "I should have done more," she said finally. "I should have called the police when they wouldn't go back for you. You were 17, I reminded her. "It wasn't your responsibility." "Still," she insisted. "I'm sorry, Thomas. Really sorry." We talked for hours, filling in the gaps of our separate journeys. She was in graduate school now, studying psychology with plans to work with victims of family trauma. She had limited contact with our parents and avoided our brothers entirely. "They haven't changed," she warned as we prepared to leave. "If anything, they've gotten worse. They've convinced themselves they're the victims in all this. Let them think what they want," I said, surprising myself with how little their opinion mattered now. "I know the truth." As Amanda turned to leave, she hesitated. "Will you be okay? Seeing them again?" I thought about the life I'd built, the people who truly cared about me, the success I'd achieved without my family's support or approval. "Yes," I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. "I'll be okay." What I didn't add was that for the first time, I was actually looking forward to the confrontation, not to seek revenge or validation, but to finally close a chapter that had remained unfinished for too long. The Denver Gallery was transformed for my exhibition, Abandoned, Finding Beauty in Broken Things. James had spared no expense, hiring specialty lighting designers to highlight each photograph perfectly. The centerpiece was an enlarged print of the mountain landscape I had captured just before being abandoned, beautiful and terrible in its significance to my life. National press had picked up the story of the wilderness photographer, and James expected a record turnout for the opening. Rachel had taken the week off from teaching to help with preparations, and Miguel drove in from Pine Ridge with a van full of friends who refused to miss my biggest moment. "Whatever happens tonight," Rachel reminded me as we dressed in our hotel room, "remember that you've already won. Your life is proof of that." I nodded, adjusting my tie in the mirror. I had chosen a charcoal gray suit that projected quiet confidence, so different from the terrified young man who had once huddled in the mountain darkness. "We'll be right beside you if they show up," she continued. "You just give the signal if you want them gone." Several friends had volunteered to act as informal security, ready to create a buffer between my family and me if needed. Amanda would be attending as well, arriving separately from our parents to avoid suspicion. By 7 o'clock, the gallery was packed with art collectors, critics, local celebrities, and photography enthusiasts. I moved through the crowd, answering questions about my technique and inspiration, accepting congratulations with a grace that still felt somewhat foreign. I was discussing the use of natural light with a museum curator when I felt rather than saw their presence. A shift in the room's energy, a disruption in the pleasant buzz of conversation. I turned slowly, and there they were, standing just inside the entrance. My father looked older, his hair now completely gray, but his posture remained rigid with the same authoritarian energy I remembered. My mother stood slightly behind him, elegant in an expensive dress, her smile tight and artificial. Jason and Michael flanked them like bodyguards, both heavier than I remembered but wearing the same smug expressions. James approached them first, clearly unaware of their identity. I watched him welcome them, offer champagne, point in my direction. My father nodded and began moving purposefully through the crowd toward me, the others following in his wake. Rachel squeezed my hand in silent support as they approached. I stood my ground, neither retreating nor advancing, simply waiting as the family that had abandoned me pushed through the final group of guests separating us. "Thomas," my father said, his voice carrying the same commanding tone I remembered. "Quite an impressive display you've put together." He extended his hand as if the last time we'd seen each other had been a friendly parting, not him driving away as I pleaded for help. I didn't take his hand. "Richard," I replied coolly, using his first name deliberately. "I'm surprised to see you here." His hand dropped, a flash of anger crossing his face before his practiced social smile returned. Of course we'd be here, supporting our son's big achievement. My mother stepped forward, arms outstretched for a hug I didn't return. Thomas, darling, we've missed you so much. Why didn't you ever call? The audacity of her question momentarily stunned me into silence. Before I could respond, Michael jumped in. Yeah, bro, you just disappeared on us. Not cool. Jason nodded in agreement. We were worried sick. Mom cried for weeks. I looked between them, these strangers wearing familiar faces, spinning a fiction so divorced from reality that it was almost impressive in its boldness. Worried sick? I repeated, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. Is that why you blocked my calls? All 101 of them? My father waved his hand dismissively. Water under the bridge. The important thing is, we were right. Look at you now. You needed that push. That push? Rachel interjected, unable to contain herself. You abandoned him in the wilderness. And look how well it turned out, my father continued, ignoring her. We knew you needed to be pushed out of the nest. Clearly, it worked. You should be thanking us. Something broke inside me then, not in the way they had intended years ago, but like the final wall separating me from complete freedom. I was suddenly, profoundly aware of the power I held in this moment, surrounded by people who respected me, in a gallery celebrating my success, with my chosen family standing firmly beside me. I'd like to say something, I announced, my voice carrying across the now quieted gallery. Since my family has decided to join us tonight, I think it's important to share the full story behind this exhibition. My father's expression darkened. Thomas, this isn't the place for. 3 years ago, I continued, ignoring his attempt to silence me. These 4 people drove away from a parking lot in Rocky Mountain National Park, leaving me stranded with no transportation, minimal supplies, and a dying phone. They blocked my calls, all 101 of them, as I begged for help. Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. A journalist from the Denver Post was already taking notes. They called it a character-building exercise. I called it what it was, the final act of abuse in a lifetime of cruelty, disguised as jokes and tough love. My mother stepped forward, tears already streaming down her face. Thomas, please, you're embarrassing yourself. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Amanda's voice rang out as she pushed through the crowd to stand beside me. I was there. I saw it all. My father's face contorted with rage. This is how you repay us? With public humiliation? After everything we did for you? You didn't do anything for me, I replied calmly. Every achievement in my life came despite you, not because of you. The night you drove away was the best thing that ever happened to me, but not for the reasons you think. It freed me from the delusion that I needed your approval to be worthy. Jason stepped toward me aggressively. You ungrateful little. Miguel and 2 other friends immediately moved between us, silently daring my brother to continue. I think it's time for you to leave, James said firmly, nodding to the gallery security staff who had begun moving in our direction. This isn't over, my father sputtered as security guided them toward the exit. You think you can just erase your family? We made you who you are. That's where you're wrong, I called after him. I made myself who I am. The moment you drove away, the gallery erupted in applause as the door closed behind them. Several people approached to express support, including the journalist who asked for an interview about surviving abandonment and finding success. Later that night, as we celebrated with friends at a nearby restaurant, Rachel raised her glass in a toast to Thomas, who turned abandonment into art and pain into purpose. As glasses clinked around the table, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. The confrontation hadn't gone as I might have imagined during those dark nights alone in the mountains. There had been no tearful apologies, no recognition of wrongdoing, no family reconciliation. Instead, there had been truth, clear, undeniable truth spoken aloud after years of silence. And in that truth, I had found something more valuable than the forgiveness or validation I once craved. I had found complete freedom from their power over me. Amanda leaned over to whisper in my ear, "You know they'll twist this story too, right? In their version, you'll be the villain again. I smiled and squeezed her hand. Let them. Their stories don't define me anymore. The exhibition became the talk of the Colorado art scene, and with the added publicity from the confrontation, it was extended for an additional month. The journalist's article, titled "Abandoned: Photographer Turns Family Betrayal into Artistic Triumph," was syndicated nationally, bringing unexpected attention to the issue of family emotional abuse. I began receiving messages from others with similar experiences. People who had been hurt by those who should have protected them, who saw in my story a path forward for themselves. Without intending to, I had become an advocate for survivors of family trauma, a role I gradually embraced as I realized how many people needed to hear that they could build a new life from the ashes of betrayal. 16 years have passed since that day, in the mountains when my family drove away, leaving me to what they thought would be a humbling journey back to their control. They could never have imagined the life I would build instead, the freedom I would find in their abandonment, or the strength I would discover in myself. Today, at 48, I am an internationally recognized photographer with exhibitions in galleries from New York to Tokyo. My work documenting vulnerable communities and environmental fragility has won awards and changed policies. More importantly, it has connected me to humanity in ways I never thought possible during those isolated years of my childhood. Rachel and I have been married for 13 years now. Our mountain cabin expanded to accommodate our 2 children, Elaine and David, named for the 2 people who first showed me kindness when I had nothing. Our kids are growing up surrounded by love and respect, in a home where jokes are never used as weapons and mistakes are opportunities for growth, not humiliation. The Pine Ridge Photography Institute is my proudest achievement, a nonprofit organization that provides arts, education, and mentorship to young people from troubled backgrounds. Each summer, we host teenagers who have experienced trauma, teaching them to use photography as both creative expression and emotional healing. You can't change what's in the frame, I tell them during their first lesson, but you can change how you see it, how you compose it, how you tell its story. My journey toward healing wasn't straightforward or easy. For years after the confrontation at the gallery, I struggled with residual anger and trust issues. Therapy remained a constant in my life, a safe space to process the complex emotions that continued to surface as I built my new life. Forgiveness was the most difficult lesson, not because my family deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I eventually came to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation or forgetting. It means releasing the burden of anger that only weighs down the person carrying it. I have very limited contact with my parents now, carefully controlled interactions on my terms that protect my boundaries while acknowledging their existence in my life. They never truly admitted what they did or apologized sincerely, but they did eventually stop trying to rewrite history when they realized I would publicly correct their version every time. Amanda and I have developed a close relationship, bonded not just by our shared past, but by our commitment to breaking the cycles of dysfunction in our family line. She became a clinical psychologist specializing in family trauma and frequently speaks at the Institute, helping our students understand the patterns they're working to overcome. My brothers never changed, never grew, never acknowledged their role in what happened. I haven't spoken to either of them in over a decade, a decision that brings me no joy, but also no regret. Some connections are too damaged to repair, and recognizing that is part of healing. Each year, on the anniversary of my abandonment, I return alone to that parking lot in Rocky Mountain National Park. It's not to dwell on pain or feed resentment. It's a pilgrimage of reclamation, a reminder of how far I've come from that terrified young man with a dead phone and 101 unanswered calls. Last year, sitting on a boulder overlooking the valley where my life was irreversibly changed, I realized something profound. The cruel joke my family played on me was, in the end, the greatest gift they could have given me. Not because it toughened me up as they intended, but because it set me free from the cycle of seeking approval I would never receive. In trying to break me, they accidentally released me. This understanding isn't meant to excuse what they did. Abandonment is never justified. and emotional abuse leaves scars that last a lifetime. But there is power in recognizing that trauma doesn't have to define your future, that the same event that wounds you can also be the catalyst for profound transformation. The life I've built isn't just about professional success or personal happiness, though I'm grateful for both. It's about creating a different legacy than the one I inherited. It's about showing my children that family means safety, not fear, support, not sabotage, love that is steady and reliable, not conditional and weaponized. It's about using my platform to help others recognize and escape toxic relationships, to understand that blood connections don't obligate them to accept mistreatment, that chosen family can be more nurturing than biological ties. Most importantly, it's about embracing authenticity rather than seeking approval, about building a life aligned with my values instead of someone else's expectations. The journey from that mountain parking lot to where I stand today has taught me that sometimes the most painful moments contain unexpected gifts. Sometimes being left behind is the first step to moving forward. Sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of something far more beautiful than you could have imagined. If you're watching this and struggling with your own family trauma, know that your worth isn't determined by those who failed to see it. Your future isn't limited by your past. Your story isn't finished being written. What do you think you would have done in my situation? Would you have tried to return home or built a new life? Leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that abandonment doesn't define them, their response to it does. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the people who leave you behind do you the greatest favor of all. They give you the chance to discover who you truly are when no one is watching.